I just wanted to talk about a couple of things involving spiritual awakening and synchronicities and all that stuff, right? I'm a divine feminine twin flame. Maybe I didn't realize this until I met my twin flame, but it all started when I met her. Right after the first kind of like separation period, if you want to call it that. I remember when we first started meeting her, first started talking, I was realized that I, for number one, bought a digital clock before that, and then that's kind of weird, right? In this day and age. But I remember seeing certain, just looking at the clock and just see this the same time almost every single time on the clock, right? And that, especially while I was actually communicating with her, that we ended up going into like a full separation period. Uh, and I remember realizing that something bigger might be going on. And then I remember, I've dealt with emotional problems my whole life. That's a given for a star seed or whatever. But I remember crying, like I don't understand this. I don't understand these feelings. I don't understand this connection. I don't understand any of this. And I remember crying and crying and crying and crying. Nothing helped. And then I looked up at the clock and it said 12:12. I remember a whole feeling in my body, and I stopped crying. I tried meditating. There was a bunch of stuff that I was learning before I met her, um, to deal with life and all that stuff and stress in my mind. And I remember that like jolted me up, made my body feel electric. And then I looked up 12:12. It basically meant ascension. You know, uh, ascension, higher, whatever. And I started looking into that, the actual synchronicities, and then after that they started unfolding. For me, it was basically like coincided number sequences. They match up on the ends, regardless, right? That's how it was for me. I these guys didn't show up till I sat down here. There was a ladybug too, so that's a sign. But so I was starting to understand that basically that your higher self is connected to the universal whatever consciousness, and that your higher self brings it back down to you. That day, I definitely woke up and I started. The syncs and signs just kept coming and coming, and they've been very strong since. I would say since I met Claire. They started when I met Claire. They became strong after a certain period, and then it started coinciding with her time. She's When I was in Colorado, she was 7 hours ahead. She's 5 hours now. So then it started coinciding with her time. Every time I just randomly look at the clock, or randomly just think about her, because I was trying to forget her, in a weird way, because it was unworldly, like what this connection was. Now I don't know if it's a divine feminine thing or like you know, I guess we're more attuned to the other side, but it ramped up. The synchronicities in general have ramped up. I've had synchronicities that people would not believe. I remember when I was in Loveland, Claire just wasn't there. Like I was on my own in a weird way, right? And I felt alone. Like I was very. It was a couple of years ago, but I was very just disgruntled with life. And I remember I took my cigarette pack that was empty, and I took her picture that I carried around with me all the time. Each cigarette pack I put it in there. But this time I took an empty cigarette pack and I put the picture inside the cigarette pack. And I just need you to take my word for this. But I took it to Loveland Lake off the boarding dock for boats and trucks and all that stuff. And I threw it in there. And I was like, if it's meant for me, it will come back. But I'm done with it. I'm done with the no answers, no nothing. I was frustrated at the moment. Given my situation, I had every right to be. But I remember, so I threw that in there, a cigarette pack with her picture in it in the water, and it went out into the lake, like went out there. I made sure I watched it go. So the next day, after sleeping like crap, weather conditions, I was homeless. I remember going back to Loveland Lake because it was on my walk or whatever, and I friggin' started to. So Loveland Lake is like out there, and then there's like a barrier, like a rock kind of wall. You can walk down it. Also, it's pretty high, and the water doesn't raise like an ocean. And as I was coming down all the rocks to get on the beach, which is a little jagged and stuff, I looked down, and her friggin' picture was there, folded. There was no cigarette pack or anything, and it was sitting on top of the friggin' the rock wall. Like someone had to have swam out there. I did it at night too when I threw it there. I don't want to explain all the details. It was freaky. It was like extremely weird, and it was one of the strongest signs that I've ever gone in my entire life. Maybe I'll go into depth on other signs and all that stuff, but the fact that I threw a cigarette pack with her picture in the water and I saw her go out. I mean, the thing is too, like no one's around there and all that stuff, but friggin' water would damage the cigarette pack and the picture. The next day, when I came back struggling to exist, I saw, I found her picture folded up right on top of the shore. It just happened to be in the general vicinity of where I was climbing down. And I guess most wouldn't believe that. They come up with reasons. They weren't there. And that's the thing about synchronicity, is it's personal to you. Um, you know, because technically it's your higher self and your guides and whatever, but like it's the other side. Uh, you know, the thing is to ask. You can ask. It will happen if you're paying attention. I guess what I'm saying is synchronicity is very important to your own journey because the world will not tell you. They have their own paths, they have their own views and all that stuff. And it's more about relying on yourself and your connection to source, right? And I guess one of those things, even then I kind of have doubted the whole Claire thing, but friggin' the twin flame thing, that's a whole other thing. That's part of the journey too. But when it comes to synchronicities, ask yourself, how would, you get your own attention in a way where your higher self get your attention away, but they're real and they're very personal. So just, pay attention to the smaller things, to the things that your mind kind of perks up at, even if it's unbelievable. Like, whatever. It's real. And it all depends on, it depends on how you see it and how you ask. And, sometimes it just happens without even asking. Right? Right. One of the strongest synchronicities I get in the real world constantly is the time. You know, the time tells me where I'm supposed to be, where I'm exactly where I need to be. It gives me messages, and I'm gonna suggest something. Um, Looking into angel numbers, like I'm gonna suggest someone. His name's Kyle Gray. He's from the UK, and he wrote a whole book on that, and that became a manual, especially when I was out, you know, um, by myself, homeless, whatever. Right? Friggin' look into the numbers. We all have our own sets of numbers, but there's a set of, the angel numbers. They all mean something, right? So if you're starting to see the numbers, you can just look them up. There's sources for that stuff. Don't Google it because Google has millions of different, everyone has their own input on it, right? And that's fine. But look at the Kyle Gray and his book. I think it's just angel numbers, or whatever. He's a good dude to just kind of, read his books or listen to his books or check out his YouTube or whatever. But for me, it's usually numbers. I mean, license plates, you know, you name it. It also, like, it aligns. If you stop paying attention, you'll realize that the numbers are, the meaning of the numbers usually line up. Your meaning of the numbers compared to the angel numbers line up with what's going on in your life. Just pay attention. That's, I guess that's it for number things and stuff like that. Like, there's power to it because they can't just text us and be like, hey, do this, do that. It's a whole other realm. It usually has to be dropped down through signs or whatever. The signs are real. Follow the signs. Follow your instincts. Follow follow your intuition. Your intuition is always right, even if it doesn't seem right. Follow it. All right.